month, I talked with Bridget Schulte about the changes made in Iceland to promote shorter work weeks and how it also helped promote greater gender equity, both at work and at home. I then talked to three dads about how they put these ideas into action by setting thoughtful limits around how much they worked in order to reclaim control over their work, family, and well-being. This month, we are exploring how a wide range of families can apply these ideas. Single parents, two mom and two dad families, as well as multi-generational households. You'll meet Bryn Jones. She's a ThirdPath integrated life advocate and founder of Gathering Elan Consulting. Also, Haley Swenson. She's a researcher and expert on gender equality at work and at home. And Michael Ramberg. He's a longtime ThirdPath community member and shared care dad. Our goal, as one of our guests said, is to help you invent the life you want to live. After you hear their inspiring stories, stick around for our 5-minute reflection when we explore how these ideas aren't just good for families, but also critical to the success of the future of work. Bryn Jones, I am so glad you are here today. We are going to be providing listeners today some really great examples of very different families and how they've configured work and care. And each of these stories has so many jewels in them for our listeners to learn from. Your story is a story of a single parent who's figured out how to really be smart about how to approach work in a way where you still have energy for your family and energy for yourself. Tell us the 1-minute version of how you got here today. For example, I know that you made some changes in the work you did, and I know that you also have gotten smarter over time around how to make sure you have energy for the family side of things. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I'll start off saying things have changed a lot since I have two sons, 14 and 12. So anyone who has kids knows how things change over time. But when I had my first son, I was the CEO of a nonprofit organization for various reasons. Having the sort of life with my family and work that I wanted didn't work with that. And so I started a business when my son was 6 months old, which I've now been doing for almost 15 years. And I really, so I was thinking about this, Jessica, and I think part of my story that is really important is I've always known that I see work and life a little differently than our norms. And so I long been very clear on the sort of life that what it means to me to have a life well lived and to have meaningful work. And what is really important, especially as a single parent, to make that life possible is to have support around me. It takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to go against the current and to figure out how to go against the current. And so every step of the way, so I've been divorced now for 8 years. So I've been a single parent for 8 years. Worked very hard to figure out co-parenting with my ex-husband so that we support each other actually a lot. His mom, who lives with him, has played an integral role, particularly through COVID, in helping us. I've got a whole community and I work deeply in my community. And so I have a lot of folks that I've learned how to ask for help over the years, learned how to get creative. And ThirdPath has certainly been hugely instrumental in having tools and skills to do all of that. As far as having the energy to do it all, I am a single parent and a business owner. So both of those require a lot of energy. I am very intentional about taking time off, real time off where I unplug. I think about 6-7 weeks a year total I'd probably take off. Foundational things like getting enough sleep every night, eating good foods, taking care of my body, meditate. I have a menu of practices that I actually track every day. And I can tell when I'm starting to really feel overwhelmed and worn out, and I need to go back and look at what I'm not integrating to my life. So
Wonderful. Thank you. You're such a good example of how it's that we think sometimes just grinding harder is the way to get through things. And what Bryn and I both learned in our lives is actually it's stepping back, taking some breaths, taking a pause that helps us think smarter and more clear about our priorities and come back fresh. We don't always do it successfully, but you're really a role model in the importance of taking some time to breathe, whether that's over the course of a day, a week, or the year. So thank you for that wonderful example. Stay tuned. I have another great example for you. Haley, I'm so glad you're here today. Again, another amazing story. We had some fun sharing our stories before we started this particular discussion. And I really heard Haley's story as a great example of rolling with the punches. She told a story where there kept on being a change in her life and her partner's life, where they had to really switch things around and do it differently. And each time they landed on their feet. And I think that's in part because they are really good at communicating. And I think the other thing I heard her say is they're really good at giving each other the benefit of the doubt. That is a powerful thing. It's really lovely. So, what are two or three important moments in this rolling with the punches story that you and your partner have done?
Well, my wife and I met when we were both researching gender inequality and some work life struggles and policy questions around paid leave and childcare. So, when we first started dating and talked about what our life should look like, we had very clear plans about, if we wanted to become parents, what that would look like, that we'd want to make sure both of us were able to keep our full time jobs, that we'd be able to have childcare and afford it. And then the pandemic hit, and as you said, one change just kind of followed another. So we ended up leaving our tiny little apartment in the city. We started working remotely. Our days just didn't revolve around work anymore. In 2020, shortly after we got married, I experienced a traumatic brain injury in an accident. And that really changed our sense of values. I think the way that we thought about work particularly changed. I became so much more aware of everything it takes for my brain to do what it does and the need for rest and quiet. And so I ended up taking a step back from my full time work after that injury and started a career as a contractor, a freelancer. And so when we entered into parenthood, which was our next big step, we had, a lot of ambition for making sure we had time and being present, some of the things Bryn talked about. But the real challenge for us has been childcare, and lots of parents can talk about this. It's expensive, it's hard to find, and so what we thought would be our beautiful plans of both working full time just didn't come to fruition. So we had to pivot, and communication has been really key to that. We talk constantly. Our arrangement looked one way for several months, and then in August, my wife got laid off from her full time job. So then I stepped up to do more paid work, and she's doing a little more caregiving. And I would say every day we talk multiple times a day about what's your schedule, what's it looking like for you, what kind of time do you need. And you mentioned benefit of the doubt. I think this is constant for us, just assuming that our partner is giving their all. And being two women, this kind of helps because we're not sticking to a script. We're getting to write this ourselves, and so we're able to say, I need time to finish this project at work, and usually the other one can say, all right, I'm going to step up and do the childcare. I'm going to take it. We're going to go play at the park. We're going to go take care of it. But when that can't happen and we say, the tank is empty, I've got nothing left, we have to work with that too. So I think that's key, is just the assumption that each of us is doing our best and giving as much as we've got every day, but also understanding that this is our parenthood moment, whether we have the perfect childcare and work arrangements or not, that we're in it. And these are these really beautiful, amazing, exhausting first couple of years of our son's life. And we want to be there and enjoy it as much as possible. So we try not to get too caught up in the detail, try not to get too caught up in a vision of what, again, we thought it would be or we wanted it to be, and instead just accept that this is where we're at. And that communication is just vital.
Wonderful, wonderful. I love that sometimes both people, their tank is empty.
Yeah.
And, and to really recognize that that just happens sometimes and how to get through those moments too. Thank you very much for that beautiful story. Hey, the next story is going to help us see how we can kind of add some more to the conversation that will bring our empty tanks back into a full place. All right, you've been listening into some great stories. And one of the things you're really going to hear us talk more about is how this changes over time. Haley's just at the beginning of this. Her child's only 2 years old. Michael's been at this for a while, and so has Bryn. And one of the ways that Michael figured out how to make sure he had a little bit more wiggle room to manage those moments when it felt like you're headed towards an empty tank was that he and his wife thought about this even before kids were born, about how they really were going to share the mental load, share care of the kids. He actually credits his wife for this. I'll let him tell that story. And he also expanded how who was involved with the care. And he's got a great story about how his in-laws have played a great role in his life. Michael, tell us a little about your story.
Yeah, so my partner deserves a lot of credit for this. She really had a vision of wanting to have her life look somewhat different from her parents, who she loves very, very much, and she'd give all the credit for raising her the best way. And she wanted her life to be a little bit different, so she wanted us to share things equally, and I was open to that. And so it's been a learning process. I didn't come in knowing what that looked like, but thanks to ThirdPath, thanks to couples counseling, thanks to consistent communication and giving each other a lot of trust and taking care of ourselves, all kinds of things, it has been possible to this point to just learn what it takes to realize, a good bit of the time anyway, this vision of sharing the care of our children, which I'm very grateful for. Taking care of my kids is the best part of my life, and I like many parts of my life, but taking care of my kids is just delightful. I'm so grateful that my partner had this idea and I went along with it. Thank goodness. So also, I think my partner again always sort of had this vision that maybe we would live with her parents. I think she loves them very much and kind of wanted to be able to support them when they needed it. Thankfully, they're still quite independent and can take care of themselves. But she always kind of thought maybe we'll live together. And I was okay with that. I think I may have been the first person to say, hey, maybe we should move in with their parents when we were looking at changing our living situation. We were going to move to a different community. And she credits me with saying, maybe we should get a place with your parents, my in-laws. So we did that. And that has been, again, just a huge help to us. Right. We moved into a large one-family home, but they worked with contractors, and they're quite handy themselves to set up a part of the house as sort of an in-law suite, where they have some independence. And our lives overlap a lot. Of course, they, thank goodness, take care of the kids if we need some extra space to stay a little bit later at work or get together with friends. And they make it possible for us once a year, and maybe would more if we asked, to go away, my partner and me, for a couple days to just connect, which is a wonderful thing. It's a huge gift that they give us every year. But even just on a daily basis, they'll be sitting in their room, maybe watching a show on TV at the end of the day. So my kids get to spend time with their grandparents, which is wonderful. And they go and watch TV with their grandparents, whatever their grandparents are watching. And my partner and I have decided just to go with that, because them getting to be with their grandparents is wonderful. The flexibility that it gives us to catch up on some work that we need to do, or go grocery shopping, or do some house chores, kinds of things. I mean, it's worth it. And it's we just trust my in-laws profoundly. We're different in certain ways, and we have profound trust and appreciation for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And Michael is someone who's had not that exact arrangement with my in-laws, but a similar regular routine of them being part of our lives and them creating space for us in our lives. What you're going to keep on seeing more and more of is how much that relationship goes back and forth. So those young children become young adults who just adore those aging parents and want to play a role in the lives of their aging parents. It's just a beautiful intergenerational experience that only gets better and better. So it's really quite lovely. Thank you, Michael. So you hear a few different stories. Hold on, we're going to get everybody back on camera to talk about some common challenges and opportunities. Thank you, everybody, for sharing such inspiring stories. You guys have all done something amazing in a world where we have very little public policy support to think differently around these issues and allow a more freedom of choice. You guys have made some really great decisions around how to live your lives. And I know, as we heard from all of you, and Michael really articulated as well, kids can be such a powerful and wonderful part of our lives. And it's just always great to hear a dad talk about the power of being involved with our kids, because that's something ThirdPath stood for forever. Let's get all genders involved with care, and that will make a big difference for everybody. So we want to talk about this idea of a North Star. And ultimately, the North Star idea is that you're kind of trying to balance, how much time do I spend at work? How much time do I spend on care? How do we afford our North Star? And these are not simple things. But again, we have a parents forum every year. This is where we really can meet a lot of people who are doing this and thinking about this. And you'll get lots and lots of ideas of how to think about what's your North Star and how to make it possible. Bryn, you said something. You said you knew you always wanted to do it kind of differently than what you saw around you. What are some ingredients about your North Star? And how has it been challenging or an opportunity to hold on to it?
Well, I mean, I had the privilege as a child to my dad was an educator, and so he had summers off. And so we always got summers with my dad, and that was just something I really cherished. My mom started off as a stay-at-home mom, and over time became a very accomplished professional, spending more and more time at work over time. So kind of as we got older, my parents spent more time at work too, and so it gave me the ability to see different ways of doing it. And you know, to be honest, the North Star moves as the kids change. The North Star moves some. It's not a there's not a perfect formula of time. For me, you know, we were talking about energy, and I think this is one of the things that ThirdPath has helped me see, that it's not for me just about being physically present. It's about being fully present, and really making sure that when I am with my kids, I am with my kids. And so I wanted to share a really quick story. Several years ago, I was taking a course thinking about how to expand my business, because I am a single income. And so money is always something I'm looking at and trying to figure out how to ramp up my business. The coach I was talking to was trying to sell this, you know, package deal that they had to help me do that. And she's telling me about how hard it is. Sometimes you just have to work so much to make it what you want for your kids. She's telling me about this big house that she has for her kids, and she's so happy that she has this big house. She has to work all the time, and she hears her kids outside her door, but she's so happy she has it. And for me, I was like, oh, thank you so much. That's like exactly what I needed to hear, because the big house is not what's like. I want to be outside that door with my kids. I want to be present with my kids. And so, you know, it's an ongoing conversation with myself. Am I present? Am I present in the way that I want to be in all the different facets of my life?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you can hear from Bryn's story when she shared it earlier is that if we're exhausted, we can't be present. And we can be exhausted either because of family responsibilities, we can be exhausted because of work responsibilities, we can be exhausted from both. And getting smart about how to pay attention to our own energy level helps us then kind of get, as Bryn said, pick her from her menu of activities that will help her kind of get more centered again. I'm going to change it up a little bit and go ahead and ask the next question, because Bryn started touching on it. And then I'm going to get Michael to talk a little bit about this. You know, so we're starting to talk about North Stars. And what we heard in your story, Michael, was how much Allie actually helped you have clarity about a North Star. That's not the first I've heard one partner having more clarity about what they wanted. We can also hear in Bryn's story how our family of origins shape our North Stars. Sometimes we want to do the opposite of what our families do. Sometimes we want to do the same as what our families do. But here you are you've got someone who's got Allie in your life who's got a pretty good picture of what she wants around her North Star. How did you guys learn around, what did you learn around energy and managing your energy? And did it also involve questions around how to make it financially affordable to think about having the right amount of energy for work and family? Were those connected for you, Michael?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think we've had a fair amount of energy restoration kind of built in from the start, in part because of just the emphasis on spending time with family. It's exhausting, of course, to be taking care of little kids. And, you know, if we're always making time to see other family members or something, that's something that we've consistently prioritized. Having our kids know their cousins, my sister's kids, Allie's siblings' kids. Usually built into that, there's more recharge anyway, at least some recharge time. Our life is structured a lot as well around Jewish holidays, and you know, we observe them each in our own way to some extent, but those I think have some kind of built-in downtime, some rejoicing, more family time. I think those things have helped us to maintain energy levels. We've both been pretty deliberate too, I think, about avoiding taking on too much work. You know, there was a point where I was negotiating the job that I've been in now for a while, and that negotiation, I chose getting more time off instead of pushing for a higher salary. And Allie's independently employed, and so she is deliberate. She doesn't take all the work that she could take. She's quite intentional about how much she travels and if she can space those things out if traveling is required. In terms of the financial part, the priority on doing as much of the care as we can ourselves and having in-laws help has made childcare a lot more affordable. So we didn't send our kids to tons of preschool, and then in the summer we're not having to, at this point, pay for at least not full summer camp. So those things make it easier, and we've got help from family and a lot of privilege, and that helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
And we're not
No,
terribly systematic about how we think about the stuff either. So
well, it's what I hear in your story is, again, empathy, that we have some privilege in the stories we're sharing today, and that there are a whole bunch of families where they'd have to do 3 jobs just to get food on the table. So I really get it that we're talking about some options here that might not be available to everybody. But I also hear in your story some intentionality of figuring out how to keep expenses low in both of your stories as a way to free up time. And that was such a great example, Michael, especially for a father. I think men feel a lot of pressure to earn money. And what you did is you turned it around and said, time is important too. And so I want to negotiate a salary solution where I have time, not just money. So again, with the goal of us trying to think about these different questions that we wanted to raise today in a fairly succinct manner, I'm going to go on to the next question. So again, we've been kind of exploring this idea of energy for work, energy for care, money, and how it all kind of intersects in different ways. Haley, you've got an interesting story too about how you've made this work. It seems like one where you've really had to kind of reinvent it a few times. How's it worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, we have had to reinvent it, and I expect we'll have to reinvent it several more times while my son is young. You know, I think we think about money as just one part of how we care for our son and each other. It is a necessary ingredient. We have to have it. We have to pay our mortgage. we have to have food, we have, there's just these baseline things that we have to have. And so we think about money as one element of care rather than as, and I think I've heard from a lot of people who consider themselves the primary breadwinner, how much pressure it can feel to feel like you just have to keep earning and keep earning more and keep growing in your career. And maybe somewhere down the road, that will be how we feel again, that's what we want to put our energy. But right now, it's just not the case. So we think very functionally about money. How much do we need and how are we going to get it? That's the question. So when my wife was full-time and salaried, that was taking care of our baseline. For me, earning was about my personal investment in my career, my sense that I didn't want to drop it off, less than needing it for the finances. When she lost her job, then okay, hey, I've been tapped back in to come in and be the earner who's meeting these needs. And so I think one key is that my wife and I really are clear that just because you're the one earning doesn't mean you're the one who's working hardest or whose needs have to be prioritized. That both of us are full people and need those need our basics, need our time to ourselves, need a chance to recharge. So caregiving is hard work, earning is hard work, and we treat them as sort of both important ingredients to our family life. In terms of a North Star, I think it's so much for us about joy. If we're not having joy, what are we doing? So it doesn't mean every moment is joyous. Some of the moments are incredibly stressful, incredibly exhausting. Some days have more joy than others. But when we need to kind of refigure out what we're doing and how we're dividing it, that joy thing for us is a big North Star, so that I can say, and I had this moment postpartum, I need more time to work. I am just like, my cup is not being filled by being primary caregiver all day long. I need to have more time for my work, for thinking, for reading, for all of those things. And so then my wife was incredibly supportive of helping me get that time back. And I think that's our story, is talking with each other, being really honest about what we need, and figuring it out as we go along. But again, I'm going to go back to the grace and benefit of the doubt with each other, that we're both convinced constantly that the other person is giving their best. And when you can count on that, then you can be really forgiving. And I often find that then I actually have more energy in the tank than I thought. When my wife asks me for something she is not getting, I go, you know what? I can do it. I can do the childcare that night so you can go do yoga. I can take it on. And then, it turns out we all get to feel a little more joy because our needs are being met.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that word joy. That's awesome. Hey, we're almost at the end of our conversation with these wonderful people. And I'm about to ask them one last question that I think you'll really enjoy hearing about. Speaking of joy. Okay, so you've been hearing some pretty wise people talk about how they've been integrating work and family over the course of their lives in very different ways. And I've asked each of them to think about, what is it about their unique approach that brought some strength to their solution? So Michael, you've lived in an intergenerational household for a long time now. What is the unique strength that brought to your work family solution? And do you have one last piece of advice for our listeners today?
I mean, it's incredibly good for the kids, especially. They just treasure their grandparents treasure them. Having more people to love your kids is an incredible thing. So there's just more love in our lives. There's more joy. There's a little bit more space, less stress. Those are all incredible gifts of the way our family is working now. And a piece of advice is, it takes work. And my partner especially has been very good at this. They're her parents, so in some ways and there's a gender dynamic, but they've just worked on it. They didn't push aside stressful points about like, well, how many dinners a week are we going to eat together? They got very specific about it. And who's gonna, when we're eating dinner together, who's going to tell the kids, take your elbows off the table or something like that? We're still figuring that out, but we've talked about it, and we continue to talk about it. Because that's it. It's not easy, and it's so worth it.
Wonderful. Love that advice too. That's fabulous. Bryn, same question. What is it that you think your experience has brought some strength to your solution? And one last piece of advice.
I gotta say, there's so many things going through my mind right now, and so many things that we've all touched on. So I think I'm gonna focus in on as my ex-husband and I were getting divorced, my North Star during that time was to show my kids that family and healthy relationships could change and look differently and survive and thrive. And so we've said a lot during the course of today about intention and communication, support, community. Being a single parent has made all of those things really necessary, and also really helpful. And so I think, getting as far as advice, like starting from that clarity of how you want to feel in life and work, what is meaningful to you and your kids, really anchoring in that and keeping that as the thing that you move towards through all the challenges and the joy, I think is probably the best advice I could give.
Yeah, wonderful, fabulous. And yes, you are to be commended for how you really anchored things so specifically during that time of transition. And look at the success today. Really quite lovely. Haley, last but not least, what do you feel has been really wonderful and unique about being part of a two-mom family and how that has shaped your wonderful solution?
Well, this is one where a lot of people project onto us strengths that we don't necessarily feel. When we first had the baby, I remember friends, relatives saying, two moms, what a jackpot. Women saying, I wish I'd had a second mom in the room doing it with me. At the end of the day, queer parents, lesbians, we're just like other parents. We're dealing with 24 hours a day. We're caring, we're loving. We also want to work. We also need to pay our bills, all those same things. I think the real strength of our family is that we have never had, I said this before, a script that we're following or that we're expected to follow. So expectations of what family life should look like, of how we should arrange work and life. We've never had to deal with that burden. And so we've gotten to write our own story from the start. And my advice to others is do it. You don't have to be queer to do that. Just say, what do we want our life to look like? Let's figure it out together. It's really liberating, and it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but at least you're actually operating on what you and your family want and need rather than any kind of societal expectation that's been placed on you. I say, get rid of those expectations, get rid of the idea of ticking boxes, and invent the life that you want to be living.
Invent the life you want to be living. I think that's what ThirdPath's been trying to help people imagine. And you guys are such great examples of that. We can see the benefits in all of your lives. I can feel it in my life. Thank you, each one of you, for sharing your stories today. It was really wonderful. Thanks a bunch. In today's 5 Minutes Moment, we're going to be talking to Dr. Carrie Spell Hansen. She's the founder and CEO of the Folk Institute. Their mission is to help organizations build workplaces that support and represent all people and all cultures. In a minute, we're going to talk to her about how organizations can make work-life integration easier for everyone. But let's talk a little bit about how your own story and how your own personal clarity was so essential for reclaiming control over your own work, family, and well-being. When I first met you, you told me a little bit about, even when you were a little kid, you knew, I wanted to make big changes in the world. And I, am committed to making this happen over the course of my life. And the way you told me is the first thought was, hey, I'm going to become a president or the president of a university. And by becoming that, I'll be able to make big change. And that is true. However, you learned something else. What I heard you say is that it meant being in a world full of people who were so stressed out by the work that they were doing. And so once again, you looked inside and said, wait, I want bigger change. I want something different than just that too. And so you started a new journey. You started the Folk Institute. Tell me a little bit about why that happened and what the Folk Institute's about.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And you did such a very good job of explaining that very succinctly, let me say that. Actually, I started the Folk Institute, which is Folke. It's a Swedish word which means people. So it's the People's Institute for Transformative Learning. And I started that because I knew I wanted to create a company that I would want to work for, that because to me the best way to teach is to be an example. So creating a company where I could actually teach other people and also have a company that could be an example for others to see what is possible with work, what we call work-life integration now.
Yes. Yeah. No, thank you. And again, I really feel like all the way through, you and I were talking about how we both had this kind of personal vision that the world could be different. And you just kept on taking steps towards making that change happen. It's really a wonderful story. So there's a whole bunch of ways. We heard how families benefit from this integrated approach. And the stories were really quite broad in their experiences, but also very common in how much the parents or the parent were benefiting from this approach that they took, very intentional in this choice. So it's clear that families benefit from this. But what about organizations? You know, why is this something that organizations should support and encourage from top to bottom in their organization? Why is work-life integration important for organizations?
Well, it's interesting because when we just the term in and of itself, work-life integration, because years ago when I started working, we didn't even have work-life balance. And then we got into this whole concept of work-life balance as if you can put it on a scale like a seesaw and just somehow get it where it's level all the way across. And that became even more stressful for people to try to figure out, well, clearly there's something wrong with me because I don't know how to balance. So and then the other thing too for me is like I realized it very early on that organizations are made up of people. It's
Yes.
not, there's not a structure that we're talking about. We're talking about individuals. So it's the individuals being able to recognize that not only do the people that they are leading need balance, they need balance. Okay, so to me, it's imperative for the leadership within the organization as opposed to the organization. It's really about a culture shift. That's what we're talking about. Like, how
Yeah.
do we shift from seeing the way we used to do things and that way was the right way and the only way when we're looking at all of the societal changes and everything and parenting styles and everything and the cultures that are coming together and cultures that are being started, when we talk about parenting. So when we look at all of that, then we begin to realize that there has to be a shift in order to keep up.
Yes, yes, because not only does the next generation want something different and will be demanding and already demanding something different, you have a whole generation that is phasing into retirement. And if you think differently at both ends of that age spectrum about how integration lets you say, how could I have them phase into retirement where we can help them maybe mentor the next generation in the work that's being done or come back in at key moments and help out. So there's just across the age spectrum ways to think in new opportunities where integration really is effective for the organization.
Exactly, exactly. And for the first time, we have to keep in mind that this is the first time that we have 5 generations in the workplace at the same time. So we have like the whole gamut. And one of the things we talked about previously was that change is the only constant. So we cannot continue to do things the same way and expect new results. That's not going to happen. So we have to evolve. Organizations have to evolve and have to adapt to in order to survive.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to talk about one way this really plays out that we've seen and see if you agree with this too. I mean, there's some pretty obvious things that organizations can do. They can, help people flex where and when they work. They can
Mhm.
put systems in place that help people kind of monitor how much work they're doing so it feels like it's a reasonable workload and it's highly focused on the most important work. Leaders, as we've been talking about, can role model these issues and role model a reasonable workload. They can create paid time off, including paid parental leave. Um, they can create workplace policies where they're not rewarding somebody for overwork. That's a common problem, unfortunately. But here's the one I wanted to get to. Most importantly, they can have managers who really understand how to support their teams around their work-life integration goals. And
Mhm.
I've seen something. At ThirdPath, what I've seen is when professionals are supported to live an integrated life themselves, whether it's balancing work and children or work and aging parents, um, they then become better team leaders. because they've kind of experienced it themselves. They have a wider idea of how to support people. They have empathy. They're better at listening. They better understand that change is constant. Are you seeing that too, that people who have committed to this lifestyle also then become really good team leaders and or organizational leaders?
Yes, I agree with you. And one of the main things that you mentioned, which of course is empathy. You know, we
Mm.
begin to because we are feeling what it is that this individual is going through. And the other thing that I've noticed is that when people that organizations and managers that have adopted this also realize that the productivity is higher.
Yes.
So
Yes.
again, when we move away from the mindset of quantity versus quality, okay, and so people when you're getting better quality, we start measuring the worth of an employee or someone on our team by what they're actually producing, as opposed to how many hours did they spend producing it. And
Yes. Yeah.
research is showing us that makes a significant difference, and I believe that's also encouraging them to stick with it.
Yeah. Actually, I'll give you a concrete example of that. I always joke that, I'm in a workplace where I'm very much supported to live an integrated life. And yet there are times when myself or my team gets overloaded. And when I'm overloaded, what I see is our efficiency goes down, my creativity goes down, my ability to think smarter about how to get my work done. And so it's like flipping it around and having organizations see, yes, it's about changing where and when people work, but it's also getting smart about how much we work so we can do our best work, just like you're saying, when we're working. Does that sound familiar?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just so incredibly important. We've moved away from years ago. We talked about the fact that managers, executives, I should say, leaders and executives, they were bragging and receiving recognition for not taking their vacation.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, and it's those kinds shifting that mindset where you're not getting the best out of people. And then you look at that health and burnout and all of these other things that happen as a result of that too.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you bring that up. One of the earliest things I learned from the integrated leaders we've worked with at ThirdPath is how they would get smart about how to turn off work on vacation. Knowing that some vacations, maybe it meant that they had to do a little bit of something in the morning, or maybe there was one day they had to do work, but their intention was, how can I really try to disengage from work while on vacation? Because I'm going to come back refreshed and I can see how well my team performs without me micromanaging them. And
Sure.
that's a really good piece of information too. So it's just this incredible, you're modeling for your team for them to take care of their well-being. It's just a positive thing all around. It's really, really good. So wonderful. All right. So you get it, guys. You're listening in. A lot of wisdom at the Folk Institute about how we can really create these different workplaces that not just help an individual family think about these things, but help a whole organization think about these things. Um, and when you think ahead about the next 5 to 10 years, and we're kind of seeing this growing divide between organizations that get it and organizations that are kind of stepping backwards and asking people to come back on site. You know, what do you predict things will look like 5 or 10 years from now? And what do you think are some of the factors that are contributing to that?
Well, first and foremost, you know that I'm an optimist, what I call strategic. I am strategically optimistic, which means that basically that I strategically plan and figure out the mind, like what will it take? It's a mindset. That would be the best way to describe it. Like combining I would call positivity and being intentional, excuse me, thoughtful planning and then also taking action. So, from that standpoint, I answer your question by saying that I see it's a cultural shift, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, that I believe it's an evolving understanding of how personal and professional lives intersect, because that's what's going to require. In the next 5 to 10 years, I anticipate that there's going to be significant changes in the workplace that's going to be embracing this integration. And I think it's more from a standpoint of not only seeing the benefit of it, but the pressure of not doing it, because we have people that are taking a stand that's saying no. Okay, no more. And you want quality workers, and you want workers that's going to show up and want to be there. You don't want to be watching them. I believe by embedding work-life integration into cultures, organizations are going to create environments that acknowledge the complexities of modern life. Okay,
Yeah.
and it basically empower the employees to thrive both professionally and personally, because now we know you have to be able to do both. And then the shift will also redefine success. Okay, what does success mean in leading to a healthier and balanced and more productive workplace? Because at the end of the day, when you're talking to leaders, they look at the bottom line. And when you can say, with me with a background in finance, when you can say, let me show you what's going to cause your bottom line to increase. Okay, not only is this a good thing to do for your heart and for your head, but let's talk about your profits.
Yeah.
But believe
Wonderful.
okay, so I'll just summarize by saying the mindset and the action of the leaders has got to be grounded in trust and what you just mentioned earlier, empathy and a commitment to inclusivity. Okay, those are going to be the most significant factors, I believe, that's going to be shaping the success of work-life integration.
Yeah. And I just feel so hopeful about the organizations that are going to do that, because the amount of creativity, when people bring their whole selves to their workplace, is just quite boundless, and so beneficial for organizations. So you're listening in today, and you've heard some amazing stories. And we hope what you, the listener, have learned. If you're interested in reclaiming control over your work, family, and well-being, we've got an event every February for you. We've got the Parents Forum. And so you can meet a whole community of parents who've put these ideas into action and have been able to see how it benefits their family, but it also benefits their workplace. It also helps them become a better team leader, a better organizational leader. Carrie, as you listen in to all that you've heard today, all the wisdom you've shared, what's one last piece of advice you have for people?
Tenacity, don't give up, stand in what you know to be true, because you're going to be healthier for it. Your family and your friends will be healthier for it. Your colleagues at work will be healthier for it. And then we will ultimately have a healthier world. So that's what I would say.
Oh, so do you know why I like Carrie now? Because of what she just said. We were talking about this from the very beginning. It's
Yeah.
so good to have you those words of wisdom shared. Thank you.
Thank
Really enjoy having you here today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to have conversations with you, Jessica, and keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.